Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining in on this Sprinto close-up session. I am Aarti Srinivasan from Team Sprinto, and it's so good to have you here. Now, considering the fact that you guys have joined in for a close-up and a product demo, I'm sure you know what infosec is, right? And this conversation around information security and compliance has become bigger than ever amongst early stage SaaS startups and companies because, well, if you need to get business done, you need compliance. It's as simple as that. And the reason is compliance is usually audited by reliable, independent third party accreditors and auditors. And when you get the stamp from them, it gives you a sense of it gives you credibility and it instills the sense of trust amongst your prospects rather than you going around and saying, hey, look at me, I'm secure. So third party audits help to instill that sense of trust in you. It gives you it makes you look formidable in front of your competitors, and it makes your prospects trust you more. Now, the ability to have a shorter sales cycle and get your big ticket clients and move up market might sound fantastic to any hungry new startup, and it should. But keep in mind, compliance can be laborious and painful, and it's not only because it's difficult to understand and you spend a lot of time on it, and it also can tend to be costly sometimes. It is also because, well, it's very difficult and error prone and manual to get it done. The journey is not simple, and that's something that our founders found out when they were trying to get compliant with they were trying to get their infosec compliance in their previous startups. And then they realized there simply must be a better way to do this. And that's Sprinto was born. Now, our goal at Sprinto is simple. We want to make compliance effortless to companies that are in the cloud. Now, how do we go about effortless compliance? By simply understanding the nitty-gritties of what it takes to be compliant. And when we go down to the simplest foundation of it, compliance is actually simple. Let me explain further, right? Now, imagine that you make a list of all the things that in your company that can affect data. Now, it should be simple, considering you're a SaaS company and my data is in your hands is an assumed risk. You will have a list of people. You will have a list of entities, rather. That could be your employees, your servers, your code repos, and much more. I'm just giving you a baseline interpretation of what I mean by entities. Now, once you've listed down these entities, think about putting security measures on top of these entities to mitigate risk. For employees, that can be background checks and policy acknowledgement and security training, so on and so forth. And when you do this for a continuous period of time, that's what's called a security program. So, making sure that your security program is continuously monitored is what compliance is. Just to make sure that you're following the rules that you've set up to make sure that the risks that you potentially see are mitigated. That's it. Now, Sprinto is an entity monitoring platform that can make sure that it continuously monitors whether the checks or the security measures that you have put against the entities are in place. Now, how do we do that? Well, through the power of integrations, right? So we integrate with your Azure, your AWS, your GCP, G Suite, and we make sure that the checks or the controls that you have implemented is running smoothly and it's running continuously. Because compliance is not a one-off thing. It needs to happen every day, and all the time. That's when you're truly secure, right? Now, we are offering multiple frameworks, and I'll get to that in the demo. So now it's time to jump into the product and what we do, right? So let me get started with the favorite thing, the frameworks. So with Sprinto, we offer 15 plus frameworks, and it's literally like switching on and off a button, right? Like, for instance, we offer you SOC 2 and your ISO, GDPR, HIPAA, PCI, NIST, FedRAMP, and much more. Now, it's enabled, and you can just disable and enable compliance frameworks by just a click, which is great because it will also help you to scale to multiple compliances with ease. And I'll get to that. Now, what we do at Sprinto is once you choose a compliance framework, we map them out into controls or checks, as we call them here. Think of checks as rules that you have to follow in order to make sure that you're compliant with SOC 2. Okay, but in the interest of this demo, let me just call it checks. Now, how do we make sure that your checks are in place? Well, let's jump to integrations. We integrate with your cloud providers and your identity providers, your vulnerability management, HRMS, ticketing softwares, and much more. We have almost 100 integrations over here. You can just see them. And what we do is we make sure that the checks that we have implemented are running smoothly through these integrations. And how do we monitor it? How do we continuously monitor these checks? And that is where we get to understand what's a production and a non-production asset. Let me paint an example for you, right? Let's take AWS for instance. Now, AWS is your cloud security provider, right? So let's say that we will agree that it contains confidential customer data, right? Now, you can mark that as a production instance. So when it's a production instance, that means it's in scope of compliance checks. That means this is something that Sprinto will check in the background and put up a certain rules in place that you have to follow to make sure that your customer data is safe in the cloud. So what are those? For instance, you have AWS is on HTTPS, it redirects there, and like your database is uploaded and checked and encrypted, all of these things. Now, when the checks are passing, that means that there's nothing to worry about over here. Now, what happens if a check is shown as failing? Not to worry at all. You don't have to grapple and figure out what's going wrong, because Sprinto will tell you what's happening, will show you a video tutorial on how to fix it, and you're good to go. So this is especially advantageous for companies that are entering the compliance journey for the first time, because there's already so much that's ambiguous. The last thing you'd want is to look around and figure out how to fix a check that's failing, right? Now, when it comes to the kind of new features that we're working on, here's something that might be of interest to you people. So this is called a change management feature. Now, what's change management and why is it really important? I'm sure you know that it's a best practice that when you're making code changes that can affect the product, it needs to be peer reviewed by at least 2 other people in your engineering team, right? And what change management does is it helps bridge this peer review gap. And the use case for this is in application code security, or in your code repos, or in your environment configuration, or in your network configuration. And this is managed through a ticketing system like Jira. Now, apart from Jira, we also work on project management system like ClickUp, Asana, and more. So this system literally makes peer reviews seamless and less confusing and less complicated, which is great for engineering teams. And I'm just going to go through access control, which the name speaks for itself. What access control does is, this is where you get to manage the places where your critical access is required. So for cloud companies as yourselves, that would be your AWS, your Azure, your G Suite, and your GitHub, and so on and so forth. So there are a bunch of checks that's put up here. For instance, every user has enabled MFA in the G Suite, and then whether an access has been removed upon exit. All of that is taken into consideration, and the checks need to be implemented. Never mind the fact that they are failing over here. This is just for show. We are passing in usual. Now, when we go to staff devices, as I mentioned in the beginning of this demonstration, staff and employees are part of the entities who we need to account for when it comes to compliance security programs, right? So some of the checks that you put up in staff devices is hygiene checks. For instance, have they enabled antivirus? Have they enabled screen lock? Are their hard drives or hard disk encrypted? These are checks and these are hygiene things that you have to keep in mind, and they need to report their device and make sure that these are done. Right now, let's get to something. Just a second. Oh, now I'm excited about this, because I'm going to talk about something that vexes so many of the leaders who are starting the compliance journey, and that's policies. What are policies? Well, it's essentially a list of vague instructions that the organizations that provide these frameworks, these compliance frameworks, offer. And it's just a general set of practice that they recommend for you to be compliant with that framework. Sounds confusing? Well, it's nothing on how these policies are actually written, because it's very difficult to go through these jargon filled, vague sounding policies and spend a lot of time figuring out whether a particular instance is even of use to the company's use case or not. And with companies already having a time crunch on so many things, like you're a startup, your day is split into so many different equally important tasks, that the last thing that you want is to pour over policy documents and figure out whether it's in scope for you or not, right? You don't have to worry about that with Sprinto, because we come inbuilt with encryption and information policies that has been like written keeping tech companies in mind. So, like for instance, there is no jargon here. It's simple language, it's to the point, it's easy to understand, and it's brief. Yes, 5 pages is brief. If you look at a GDPR document, that's like 88 pages long. So this is quite brief. It will highlight what's in scope, what's needed, and what are the expectations from you. And the best part over here is that these policies are written in collaboration with our audit partners. So you know for a fact that this is exactly what you need in order to say and reasonably prove that you have done what it takes to be compliant, which is great news for everybody, right? And one of the things that we offer is also security training. So if you're an organization that's trying to follow a compliance framework, you need to know that there is a certain expectation on your employees to have basic security knowledge. So you have a basic security program where it walks you through. There's a PPT where it walks you through the best practices that you need to do, like security measures that you need to take, and all the hygiene measures that you need to do. So you go through all of this and you acknowledge that you've read it. And sometimes you can even have a test. Like over here, you can toggle on and off whether you're going to keep this compliance program, the security awareness program, as a tested or a non-tested one. So if you're keeping it tested, there's a multiple choice test at the end of it, and they have to pass in order to complete the training. And this is you have a basic security program, and you also have a framework enabled security program. So over here you would see that we have one for HIPAA, we have for GDPR, and we have for PCI DSS. So this essentially means that this training program will cover exclusively what's required in GDPR. What are the security best practices that companies need to do for GDPR? And upon taking that test, the employee can be reasonably expected to know what it takes in order to remain GDPR compliant in their organization, right? Now, speaking of multiple frameworks, I touched upon this in the beginning, but I'm going to show you how and why it's so easy for you to scale to multiple frameworks and become compliant with multiple frameworks at Sprinto. I'm going to show you this, like a very simple example over here, right? You see that I have enabled SOC 2 security, SOC 2 availability, confidentiality, and these two are not enabled. As I mentioned, this is a switch on and off kind of a program, right? So let me just show you. Now it's not enabled here. I'm planning to enable it now. Now what it says over here is, in order to enable SOC 2 processing integrity, Sprinto is going to map out 7 controls or checks for me to adhere to in order to reasonably prove that I am compliant with this framework, right? There are 7 total controls, of which, let me go back. Of which 4 of those are already active. 4 of these are already active because we have other security frameworks with which we are already compliant with. So all I need to focus on is these 3 additional controls which will get added. And if I just follow these 3 things, and if I just enforce these 3 things, I can say that I'm also compliant with SOC 2 processing integrity. So you come from 7, you are less than half of the compliance is already done for you. More than half of the compliance is already done for you. And this not only reduces time and effort, it also makes you scale with ease and get compliant with multiple frameworks with ease, which becomes very advantageous for companies that are working in different geos and work with different country laws, right? Now, how do we make this possible? It's literally through our entity monitoring approach that we take. So we don't go framework by framework. We take the company's security entity program as a whole, and then we break it down into measures. So this way, this almost common sense driven way has helped companies get compliant not with just one, but with like even 4 or 5 frameworks with considerable ease. Okay, now there's going to be an exciting feature number 2, which is integrated risk assessment. Long story short, I think this is an awesome feature. I'm gonna explain to you why. So as companies, we all agree to work under certain stipulated risks, right? We agree that risk is part of the business that we do in, and based on how risk averse or pro risk we are, we take these certain assumptions into consideration and we do our businesses. With risk assessment, not only does Sprinto list down the risks that happens in your industry, it also puts the impact value or the industry benchmark for it, and then shows you a mitigation plan that you can enforce to make sure that you can avoid this risk, and then shows you how likely is this risk supposed to hit you even after the mitigation plan has been enforced. Very simple. Okay, so let's take for instance this risk. So this risk arising from staff members who have discontinued their contract or employment, right? So it says that on an impact of 0 to 10, this would be a 6. This would be a decent threat, a decent enough risk. And then it gives you, Sprinto offers you a mitigation plan. How do you make sure this risk does not happen to you? You do a process for offboarding your staff. It's given you what you need to do, and it's put that as a check. Now, after you offboard the staff and after you ensure that this check has been implemented, you see the post likelihood of this happening. So it comes from 6, which is like, let me just take it as 60% likelihood, to 20% likelihood. And then it tells you that this is it's 1.2 out of 10. That's how likely that this is supposed to happen to you after you implement this mitigation plan, right? Now, the best part about this risk assessment is that this is completely customizable to, you have complete autonomy over it, right? You can tell me if this risk is applicable to you or not. You can say that, I mean, I'm fine with this. I don't think this is a big enough threat. Then you can just switch this off. It completely depends on you. You can create the impact value. You can create your own mitigation plan if you do not agree with this. And you basically control whether you want to take a risk as applicable or not, depend on the basis of how risk averse or pro risk you are in the company, which is super neat. So another, I did mention that Sprinto is purpose built for cloud hosted companies, but it's also purpose built keeping difficulty and time in mind. So it's very difficult for companies to sit down and list literally every risk that they might have, right? So Sprinto offers risk libraries that you can enable. It's currently enabled over here. So these risk libraries offer templatized risk. Like, it tells you that these are the risks that you can reasonably expect as happening, and it lists down everything. It shows you the impact value, and all you need to do is just plug and play this based on your company. Reduces time, reduces effort, keeps things simple, keeps things effortless. That's what we are at, right? Now, you have enabled the framework, you have put up the checks. Now you need to know how your security posture looks from a bird's eye POV, and that's where our dashboard comes in. So now you see passing checks. These are checks that you have enabled, enforced, and these are working continuously and they're working well. You don't have to worry about this. Due checks are those that are coming up, that those are on its way, those are on the horizon, and you need to keep an eye out for it. Critical checks are those that have passed the due date by which they need to be solved, and they're they are a point of concern for you. But where you really need to worry about is failing checks. Failing checks are critical checks that have passed the due date and have now, when upon failing, are posing a security problem for you. This is you're risking non-compliance when you get to failing checks, right? Ideally, your compliance dashboard needs to be at 100% here, needs to have 0 failing checks, and you can just sit easy if that's the case. Well, we do understand that edge cases are how businesses are made. Let's just take one for example, right? With some of the frameworks that we place, background verification becomes a mandatory check that you need to do for employees, right? Now I'm onboarding a new employee. and it says that in my due checks, it says that background verification is pending for this person and needs to be done in a month, right? It's a due check. And then I check with the person and I realize that this person stays in the EU, where background checks are illegal. One cannot perform a background check on their employee. So what do? I cannot let this go to failing. So normally with our other competitors, you would see that this will go to failing because they do not keep edge cases in mind. Not us. So we over here with the checks, you can just write down an edge case and say that this person, background check cannot be done by this person for this person because of so and so reason, and that will be presented as an evidence to the auditor. So you can rest easy with the fact that you're not going to risk non-compliance because your software does not recognize an edge case, right? Now, when we're getting to failed checks, you can always focus on accountability here. So let me just show you. I can see that all of this is failing. I'm seeing, I want to understand how do we fix it. So I can see that infra operations person is this certain person. So I know that they are the ones who are in charge of making sure that this check doesn't fail. So I can directly reach out to them and make sure that this is put to rest, right? Which is a really nifty thing to have in mind, because it is really important to make sure that we find someone who's accountable for it, and we are not running around trying to figure out how to get your checks to green, because you always know who to reach out to make sure that happens, which is a really good feature to have. So that's the dashboard for us so far. Now let me just get to the next stage of it, right? So with compliance, there is always 3 stages that happens before you can say that you're compliant, right? That involves, let me open it. So that involves implementing a security program, operating a security program, and auditing a security program. So with Sprinto, implementing operation and audit becomes a breeze, and we'll tell you how. So you have set up the check, like you now know that you want to be compliant with, let's say, SOC 2. You will have a workshop style guided implementation program where through Zoom calls, where we'll show you how each check needs to be presented, how each check needs to be set up and organized. And the best part is we go at your pace. You can tell us how quickly you want to sprint to audit, and it'll go based on your pace. These implementation programs these calls will help you implement all the checks that the frameworks have put for you based on the entities that we have mapped, and it's completely guided and driven by what you have and the edge cases that you want to map out and the kind of policies that you want to follow. Now, once you're done with the implementation program, you're ready for audit. Your audit prep is finally completed, and you're good to go. With audit platform, we offer 2 options for you. One, you can bring your own auditor. That's great. Or number 2, you can go ahead with an audit partner that Sprinto has onboarded. Now, if you choose the latter, you get a contactless audit. What do we mean by that is we present your evidence tailor-made to how the auditor wants it. So like each auditor, let me just give you an example of this, right? Like each auditor would like evidence to be presented in a very particular way, would like screenshots to be presented in a very particular way, and unless they are presented that way, audit process becomes extremely cumbersome. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of revisions that you need to do, and in short, it provides a lot of anxiety to the company, right? Over here, with things being presented exactly the way auditor wants, they can just simply look at what they need to look, pick up the evidence that they want to pick, and makes the entire process seamless. I think I actually know some of our customers who just had one call with the auditor. They just said hi, and then before they knew it, they got their draft report, and before they knew it, they were compliant and they had their audit attestation. So which is just great, because you reduce so much back and forth. You reduce the anxiety, you reduce the time and effort it takes with the auditor, because everything is presented the exact way that they want, which makes it truly contactless, and which is a great thing to have, right? And I have been talking about what we have so far at Sprinto. Now here's what we are expecting to come up with this quarter. So as I was telling you, we do guided implementation sessions, which usually range from 6 to 10 of them, depending on how complex and complicated your company is. So we are going to help you sprint to SOC 2 Type 1 in less than 5 sessions. That's like less than 5 hours. You will be audit ready for your SOC 2 Type 1. We are coming up with a shareable security posture, which shows your security posture to anyone who wants it. It's a templatizable, customizable security showcase, which is a great thing to have. You can just like share it with prospects who are asking you about your frameworks. HubSpot does it. It's a great feature to have. And we are of course coming up with Slack notifications, which helps you move quick with decision making and like gives you timely alerts, and that's also nice. And we are also doing a UI revamp, which is going to make Sprinto super easy to use, super easy to navigate all over again. And we're also creating our own ops dashboard where you can check the health of the checks that you have put in. So like quite similar to the current dashboard that we have, but completely from a people ops and operations point of view. So, and of course, there's going to be much more that's on its way. But these are the ones that I want to share with you, and I want to let you know that compliance has never been easier than what it can be when you choose Sprinto. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on this call, and I hope I was able to solve some, if not all, of your questions. And looking forward to partnering with you guys, and like hope you guys choose Sprinto. Thank you.